Hi, everybody. Welcome to New Life in Christ. I want to start out by asking you today what seems like a very simple question. Other than inheriting or stealing money, how do you get more money? You work for it. You got to earn it, right? See, when you inherit or steal money, among other things, getting in trouble, you don't really know the value of it. In 1957, I was 10 years old and I was in the fifth grade, and I really wanted a record player, but my folks didn't have money to buy me one. So I collected GreenStamps from my folks and from other people who bought groceries at Kroger's where my folks worked. I would sack groceries and carry them out to people's car. I didn't get paid for it. Occasionally I'd get a tip, but I would ask people, "You going to keep those green stamps?" And a good portion of the people said, "No, I just throw them away." I said, "Well, could I have them?" "Sure." Okay. So I collected them. Purchasers got a stamp, one stamp for $1 purchase. You paste it in a book that could hold 1,200 stamps. Now, if you purchased enough, like if you purchased $10 worth of groceries, you could get a stamp that was worth 10. So, all right. At that time, bread was 19 cents a loaf. Gas was 24 cents a gallon. You could buy a hamburger and a Coke at Dairy Queen for a quarter. It took a lot of purchases at a grocery store to generate a stamp, like 5 loaves of bread, one stamp. It took me a lot of time and effort, but over a year's time, I got a record player. It was one of the most expensive things in the catalog. 1,200 green stamps, some of them worth 10 or even 50. So I still didn't have any money for records. The cheapest one were 99 cents a piece, plus a penny tax, a buck. The cheapest ones were jazz records. It was the least popular music, so that's what I bought, and that's what I ended up playing. My folks didn't have any extra money to buy records for me. The average income was less than $2 an hour then. My dad made about $3 an hour, or about $135 a week. So I needed to earn money. One of the ways that I started to earn money was selling the Grit newspaper. It was a weekly newspaper that billed itself as America's greatest family newspaper. When I sold it in the 1950s, it had a national circulation of over 500,000, primarily in small towns of less than 10,000 people. It was sold door to door by kids recruited from ads in a comic book. I answered one of those ads. Here's what the owner, the publisher of Grit, made sure that all the newspaper staff understood and abided by. This was the main core thing of what they were all about. He said, "Always keep Grit from being pessimistic. Avoid printing those things which distort the minds of readers or make them feel at odds with the world. Avoid showing the wrong side of things or making people feel discontented. Do nothing that will encourage fear, worry, or temptation. Wherever possible, suggest peace and goodwill towards men. Give our readers courage and strength for their daily tasks. Put happy thoughts, cheer, and contentment into their hearts." Boy, think about the news that we see today. That would be good advice for today, wouldn't it? Not just for the news, but for my teaching and writing and all the things we do. All right, to get started with my paper route, I had to come up with $2, which I made from doing some other jobs, mail it to Topeka, stamps were 3 cents, where the Grit was published. In turn for my $2, they sent me 20 papers, a dime apiece. Then I went door to door and got customers. I was 10 years old, and I sold the Grit newspaper for 15 cents apiece. So I made a nickel a paper. Now, 20 copies of the paper, I made $1. So I took the other $2, sent it to Topeka, got 20 more papers for the next week, and I developed some regular customers. As in any business, some moved away, some died. I had to get new customers, that kind of stuff. So I had to go to at least 20 houses every week, knock on the door, wait till somebody answered it, wait till they went and found their money, came and paid me. Sometimes they wouldn't be home, and I'd have to go back 2 or 3 times. Also, every week I had to ride my bike to the post office, get the papers, take them home, roll them up, put a rubber band on them, fill my bag, deliver them, get my list of where they went, rain or snow. Sometimes I'd have to go back 2 or 3 times. It took at least 2 hours a week, and so I made about 50 cents an hour. I learned what it took to make what it took to make a dollar, what a dollar was worth in 1957, what I could get for it. I learned that when I went to the store where they sold records and I picked out that 99-cent record and I went up and gave it to the clerk, I gave him my $1 bill and they gave me the record back. It cost me a couple hours of hard work, but I got something I wanted. It was rewarding. I had a sense of accomplishment. What do you think is the equivalent today of what a dollar was in 1957? Well, economists say, according to inflation and everything, $87.52 today is what a dollar was worth then. Now, I don't know what all is based on that, but gas is like 10 times more than it was then. Cars are 15 times more than they were then. Houses that you could buy for $10,000 then sell for $200,000 now. But think of it this way. It took me a minimum of 2 hours, plus expenses and collection expenses and having capital tied up and everything, until I made the sale to get my dollar. A lot of good business lessons to learn, especially to teach kids and even adults about business. Sometimes people would stiff me. They would not pay. What do you think that cost me? Well, it cost not just the nickel profit. I also lost the 10 cents I had to pay the company for the paper. So I had to sell 2 more papers just to get back to breaking even and come up with another dime to get the next paper so I could make a nickel profit. So counting the time it would take to try to collect on those new customers and service them and everything, I learned the value of money quickly and the value of keeping your word. Said a lot about people's character. Worse than it costing me money, though, it cost me my attitude. I let it foster a bad attitude. I got mad when people didn't pay me. I was nice to them, but I got mad. I had bad thoughts about them. I said bad things about them. I came home and talked to my folks badly about them, which made my attitude worse and brought them down. You know, they might have had a good day at work, and I come home and talk about that, and all of a sudden we're all down the tubes. When people agree to pay you, and they don't, it can really hurt a friendship. What it really cost me was peace, goodwill, a good attitude. It could make the whole experience unpleasant. So what did I need to do then to change my attitude? Well, back then I didn't know. I didn't know what I know now. I just toughed it out and didn't like those people and talked about them and went out and got some more customers. Lost some friends that had been family friends and stuff because they avoided me because they knew they hadn't paid me. I learned that fast pay makes fast friends. No pay makes no friends. Now, today, I've learned a lot more. First of all, I've learned that a really good grace-filled way to handle loans, for example, I'm no longer in business, but to handle loans, when somebody asks me to borrow some money, what I do now is I ask Jesus. And if he says to give him the money, I give it to him. Now, I don't tell him it's a gift. They say, I'll pay it back in 2 weeks or whatever. But I have the mindset that it's a gift. And I don't even expect to get it back. I just give it. If I get it, and I forget about it, if I get it back, then it's a pleasant surprise. But I trust Jesus to take care of me financially, and I don't worry about it. And you know what? I found when I do that, when I give, I receive even more. Not always instantly, but always, and sometimes it is instantly. You know, the value of something's really determined by your need. In 57, I thought I needed a record. Took 20 nickels to get a record. Well, fast forward 31 years to 1988. Then I was making over $10,000 a month, and a nickel wasn't a big deal. Shoot, $10, $100 wasn't a big deal. Then in 1989, I left that $10,000 a month income, took a job at a church. I'm not complaining, not putting the church down, just giving you information. Took a job at a church making less than $1,000 a month. I felt God was calling me to do that, and I know he was. Kitsy went back to work teaching school so we could make ends meet. All of a sudden, $10 meant a lot. I was in the Army Reserves, and I still played some music for income, but the value of money took on a whole different meaning. One day I was at the church in my office, and a guy showed up there needing money. I prayed, and I felt Jesus telling me to give him what I had, which was $10. That's all the cash I had in my billfold. So I gave it to him. I walked home that day. The church was 10 blocks away or something like that. Got the mail from the mailbox. And in the mail was an unmarked white envelope, no return address, no note in it, just a $100 bill. Coincidence? You ever had things like that happen? All right. That day, I gave $10 and I got $100 back right away. It doesn't always happen like that quickly, but Jesus does always provide. All right. We talked about me needing records for my record player and money to live on. Let's think about something else that we all need that's arguably more important. We need friends. We need love. We're hardwired to want to crave love. So we make a friend, we fall in love. At first, things are fine, but then things happen, don't they? And your friend can stiff you, like some of my customers. They can hurt you, they can lie to you, they cannot keep commitments. Well, then what happens? Well, then we have a choice. We can let that make us bitter. We can take the offense and ruminate on it, stuff it down inside. We can think in our minds about how bad they are. We can think of things that we could do to hurt them and not get caught. We can get bitter. We can even repay evil with evil. We can have a bad attitude and suffer. And we can talk about that other person with our friends, our spouse, our family, and bring them down like I did my folks at the end of a day when I didn't get paid. Or we can do what Jesus does. We can give grace. And when we give, we always get back more than we gave. That's how we really learn the value of what grace is. That's how we find out what grace really is, when we give it. Because only then do we know what it cost us, what it's worth. The value of our friendships can be seen in the grace that we give and that we receive. Now, it's been a few weeks since my book, Grace Is, came out. I've been getting nice comments and reviews from all kinds of people in person and on social media, which I appreciate. People from other countries have been asking how to get Grace Is, the book Grace Is. And fortunately, now it's on Amazon. They can get it there. And that phrase, how to get grace, people write me, how do we get Grace Is, has triggered a lot of thinking in me. In the book Grace Is, I give a lot of different definitions about grace, but primarily I try to show people that personally knowing God and experiencing God, having an intimate relationship with the real God of the universe, is how we experience grace, and that is true. But Papa's been showing me that there's an even more important way that we start to really grasp and experience what grace is. That's to learn what it cost. To personally experience what it cost to give grace. When we inherit it, when we get it from God, like inheriting money from our parents, we don't always know what it costs, what it's worth. Jesus actually learned from obedience, the obedience of going to the cross and giving grace, giving unconditional love, and giving up his life. John says in John 10:18, or John quotes Jesus as saying, "No one takes my life away from me. I give it up of my own free will. I have the right to give it up, and I have the right to take it back." And he did. He said, "This is what my Father has commanded me to do." Jesus gave up his life. He let us, he knew what he was doing. He let us treat him horribly and then kill him. Now, let's look at what he taught about giving grace to our enemies, to people hurting us. This is from the Sermon on the Mount. In Luke 6, verse 38, in addition to telling people to love your enemy and pray for them and do good to them, forgive them, he said, "Give, and it will be given to you. People will pour into your lap a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. For by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you in return." Then the Apostle Paul learned this from Jesus. When he was Saul, before he met Jesus, he hated Jesus. He thought Jesus was a fraud. He hated the church. He killed Christians. He jailed them. He persecuted them. He treated them awfully. Then one day, Jesus showed up and gave him what he had coming, according to Jesus, not according to religion. He gave him grace. Jesus taught Paul, it's more blessed to give than to receive. Paul learned that as wonderful as grace is, it's actually more blessed, it makes you happier to give grace than to receive it. Paul said, he's quoting Jesus in Acts 20:35, he said, remember the words of the Lord Jesus, that he said, it's more blessed to give than to receive. Oh, how about that? He learned it. In Acts chapter 20, Paul's, leading up to that, Paul's leaving the elders of the church in Ephesus. He knew he would never see them again. And so in verse 32, he says, so now I commend you to God and to the word of his grace, which is able to build you up and give you an inheritance among all those who are sanctified. Remember the words of the Lord Jesus, where he said it's more blessed to give than to receive. You find grace, you find out what grace really is when you give it up. Jesus equated this principle to giving up your old life. You find real life when you give up your old life. In Matthew 19:39, Matthew 16:25, and Mark 8:35, and Luke 9:24, all of those places Jesus says almost the exact same words. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. What are you giving people when you give grace? You are giving life. Life you received from Jesus. Abundant life. You're actually giving people grace. Christ in you, the hope of glory, Christ in us, gives grace to other people as us. God's glory. 1 John 4:17, John says, as Jesus is, so are we in this world. We are grace. Jesus, when he came, he lifted up the sin of the world off of people. He forgave it. He took it away. He decided not to hold it. He decided this before he created us, not to hold it against us. He eliminated anything that we might think we owe him because of anything we've done wrong. That's what he did. He gave grace. Grace is unconditional love in perpetual action, continually working all things for the good of the restoration of all. It's the only thing I know of that increases as you give it away. It's unlimited. It's inexhaustible. The more you give grace and unconditional love, the more you get what grace really is. You understand what it's worth. You know the value. Love gives. Grace gives. What does it mean to give grace? The very best way I've come to understand, the very best way to grasp and understand grace and unconditional love is to give it. It's even more meaningful than to receive it. Because when you have the power and the ability to hurt someone, to punish them, to withhold love, to be bitter, to condemn, to shame, to gossip, to talk about, to withdraw, to separate from somebody, to exclude somebody, to judge them, to backbite, and you don't, especially when you don't have pride about not doing it, but instead you give love and grace, then and only then do you really grasp how amazing grace is. This is divine power, omnipotence, in its most powerful form. Can you think of examples and ways that you can give grace? For me, the best way to know when and how to give grace is to listen to Jesus. He'll tell you, real time, in the moment. And when you give grace, you grow in grace. You experience even more grace multiplied. And when you give grace with the attitude of not expecting anything in return, like I do with loans, then no matter what the other person does, you get even more grace from Jesus. It's a win-win-win deal. Hope this is helpful, everybody. See you next time.